Aku asyik orang.
Hamba hamba pada bawa.
Asyik. Orang lain nak mau macam mana lagi?
Sebenarnya mama ada. Tambah kot.
There are only two ways to reach the HAGAHAI people, by helicopter or on foot. Their home in the heart of Papua New Guinea, their very existence, was a secret from the outside world until 1983. In December of that year, 5 HAGAHAI elders came out of the jungle, crossed the Uat River, and asked for help. Their people were sick, they said. Their people were dying. Carol Jenkins came here in 1984 to document what was going on. As a medical anthropologist working for the Papua New Guinea government, Carol's first encounters with the HAGAHAI were in an official capacity. 3 years and 8 trips later, her work among these primitive and isolated people has become a labor of love. For thousands of years, this Stone Age group had been hidden from the outside world. As time and exposure worked their changes on most other peoples, HAGAHAI culture remained more or less the same, a living secret deep in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Possibly the last unknown group on Earth. There were fewer than 350 HAGAHAI when Carol arrived. She began at once to gather information about the population, to interview the people about births and deaths and disease. But the more she found out, the more confused she became by her findings.
The difference between the rate of the crude death rates and the crude birth rates was tremendous. To such a point that friends of mine, anthropologists, doubted my work. They said, Carol, your numbers are wrong. They've got to be wrong. There's no such thing as a population like that. I checked again and again, and it turned out to be true. And once that was clear to me that I did have good data, and that it was indeed true, this population was dying out, I knew that I had to make some sort of intervention. I can't continue to watch people like under a microscope as they die out. That's just unethical and something I couldn't do personally. This baby is special because it's the only one that's lived this year. There have been 8 babies born since 87 began, and everyone has died. This one is about 2 months old, and it's the only living baby. Sabukira. Masina. The mother, we think is a bit short on breast milk, but and if we can protect it from the diseases that do most of the killing, which is pneumonia and diarrhea, among others, well, then we might have a chance of saving this one. But we have an infant mortality rate here that's wiping out more than 3/4 of the children after they're born. The underlying sickness that overlays all the others is malaria, and that means that almost daily there's a sense of fatigue, having very little energy, and at least twice a month actual fevers and headaches, and they have to function with that. On top of all that, at a rather constant rate, they also have additional infections, flus and dysenteries and other sorts of respiratory illnesses that come through here. So you combine all that, and there's a large number of days per year that people are sick and are unable to exert much energy in the food quest or in any other constructive activity. People sometimes get worried about our drawing blood because they get under the impression sometimes that it's non-renewable. They wonder, why would you be taking blood from them if they also hear that they're short on blood? And what we try to explain today is that actually their diets are not that poor, that they have good diets for building blood. They have plenty of green leaves, and they have a fair amount of meat. My number is down below to us, or say man short long blood. All right, me play no nap kiss him. Long this look man. He go down, or say 2, 3 something, M. Now we can communicate in Tok Pisin, which is a language that developed in Papua New Guinea as a trade language. Suppose you know when him na siki stop yet long blood? All this Lamarki stop yet long blood. It has a little bit of German, it has a little bit of Italian, it has a lot of English, and it's very expressive. But in the very beginning, we had to use 3 interpreters so that we'd speak in Pisin to a fellow who spoke Kobon, and he would change it to Harawai, and the Harawai interpreters would change it to HAGAHAI. I remember saying, "What's your mother's name?" and waiting for 25 minutes and getting an answer like, "We don't do that." Short him, no got, no belong short him, blood belong malaria. Work belong bugger up in blood, no this lick something, not he shoot him, he go inside now.
Road blood.
You know, he go inside long road blood now, you go round, now bugger up him all blood.
Yeah, time he got skin out, this time more blood, he broke.
At 2.5, Carol's son Ryan understands Pidgin, English, and some HAGAHAI. I'm not afraid about Ryan becoming very sick out here, partially because I know that the children in particular are so malnourished that they become sick more often and it lasts longer and it's more severe. With my child, that's not as likely to happen. Government funding for the HAGAHAI health program is minimal. So far, Carol has raised enough from grants and donations to continue the work. But it's a constant struggle, an unnerving race between fundraising and extinction.
Up and down. What if anybody ever had oral cancer?
35.6.
Carol and the medical team work out of 2 Baptist mission bases in the HAGAHAI territory. Dinah Lai is an anthropometrist. She weighs and measures the HAGAHAI. Carol's husband, Travis Jenkins, records the data and keeps a photographic record of the people. George Anyon does all the blood work and helps Carol with her field research. Chris Bullen is a doctor attached to the Baptist mission. Originally from New Zealand, he has worked in other parts of Papua New Guinea, but never a place where the needs were so pressing.
and we can't just disconnect ourselves from our neighbours in other countries. And to me, what I'm doing here is part of the command to love my neighbour. I see these people as much my neighbours as the person who lives next door to me in my house.
Chris is no stranger to malaria, an ailment that most HAGAHAI live with most of the time.
Tingtang? Got a very pale, pasty tongue.
Sadly, the dangerously swollen spleen that can accompany the disease is a common sight here.
See, it's massive, running right out around here, right over into the right side of his lower abdomen, and I'm trying to get below it here, right down in the pelvis. Schools grade that as a grade 5 spleen.
What are the chances of this actually rupturing?
Well, I'm astounded that it hasn't ruptured already.
Malaria is not the only disease Chris treats.
Having a spleen this size.
By emerging from their isolation, the HAGAHAI are now coming in contact with many previously unknown diseases of the civilized world.
Still alive.
Ironically, their search for medical assistance is leading them through a minefield of new threats to their health.
Well, these people have been isolated from most of the common diseases that are in the West and in a lot of other countries that are killer diseases if you don't have any protection against them. We know that these people have a poor immune response, a poor defense system against a lot of these diseases, and what we're trying to do here is to give them immunity or protection before the disease reaches them. If we don't get in now and do something about it, then the chances of this group of people surviving over the next few decades is very, very slim.
The immunization program has been a difficult thing to implement among a semi-nomadic population. Beyond the problem of catching up with people lies another challenge: to keep the vaccines alive for more than a couple of days in high heat and humidity. Carol has been trying for 3 years to come up with a solution. This year, her efforts paid off. A small solar-powered refrigerator was donated by Rotary International. Finally, vaccines taken for granted in the West, polio, tetanus, diphtheria, can be given to the HAGAHAI. The solar fridge will also offer hope to HAGAHAI children, as vaccines against common childhood diseases can be administered for the first time. Somehow, it is the childhood mortality that seems the most tragic.
With these very high death rates, there's a lot of orphans. So I have children with either one parent missing or both parents missing. And other families pick up the responsibility of raising those children. They're never left just alone in the bush. There's a very strong bond among families. Those within a family, one's primary responsibility is to one's spouse and children and parents. And beyond that, there's lesser responsibility. But the only thing that binds the society together is the sense of family. As far as we can tell, the HAGAHAI are probably a leftover group from the previous time who were living in an area that was not an area where people made gardens, but an area where people gathered food, hunted for food. They're very unlike all the rest of the people of Papua New Guinea because the majority of the rest of the country are very much gardeners. And these people don't depend much on gardens at all. They have a tremendous knowledge of the bush. They know all the birds and all their habits and all the animals and all their habits and what they eat and all the varieties and the males and the females and their stages of growth. They have tremendous information about the bush animals and the bush plants. And that's a scientific background. That's an empirical body of knowledge that the people have that they work with, which is certainly as sophisticated as in concept as any scientific cataloging that any society does. Even though the technology is very simple, it is ingenious. That is, it's clever, and that's typical of all hunting and gathering peoples. They have all kinds of little methods that are clever and ingenious and which make life possible for them.
What's up? Kaya ka na ba? Nabraham niya ka ng gano'n mo.
They don't really live as a band, as some other hunting and gathering peoples do. That really requires that if you're going to run around in groups of 20 or 30 at a time, you need big game to be able to feed yourselves. These folks have small game. The largest thing is a pig or a marook. So they very seldom move about in any groups larger than 3 or 4. It's just the family group, and that's what hunts. There's a sense of continuity that's very important to these people. They've only learned to count in numbers and use numbers to designate years since the mission's been here. Their sense of time is much more like what people say of Australian Aborigine time, the dreaming. That is, it's always the same, it goes over and over again. It's a connection in an almost mystical sense between the ancestors and today. Their sense of time requires that the future be much like the past in order for for time to continue. Well, I couldn't live like the HAGAHAI. I don't have the skills. One has to know the techniques of surviving in a society like this, in a terrain like this. These people have been trained since, of course, childhood, and they know where to find that little piece of dry wood that's hidden under something or other, or the type of tree that will light even if it's wet. They know things that I do not, and I couldn't begin to survive out here. I would perish rapidly.
Easier than survival in the bush, life on the mission bases is still fairly rudimentary. Carol and her family live in thatched huts without electricity or plumbing. Though water can be gathered from local streams, almost all their food and all supplies must be brought in by helicopter.
You make it. One play. One play. You make it. Water.
Baptist missionaries were the first people the HAGAHAI contacted and have continued their work ever since. Some HAGAHAI attend Sunday services, but whether for the novelty or out of a growing belief is uncertain. Missionaries and anthropologists share certain frustrations.
I think perhaps the toughest thing for an anthropologist working in Papua New Guinea is the same sort of problem anthropologists run in everywhere. It's gaining the confidence of the people. Papua New Guineans can be very secretive. They can lie to an anthropologist a lot. They know which things are likely to be very much in conflict with Western values or Western activities, and they hide that very commonly. And gradually, it takes time, but gradually they come to accept you, and one can get the information one really wants to get. Yeah, there's a delicate balance in dealing with these people. The delicate balance between how much do you give to the people who help you learn about them, your informants, how much do you let them take from you, how much do you take from them without each of you feeling you're being exploited. And that's very difficult.
There's also the delicate question of how much of the modern world to bring in and how much to withhold. Carol's training has taught her that no matter how inconsequential the items she introduces, they will alter the culture in some way.
Whistle! Whistle!
Whistle! Whistle! Whistle! I make a judgment that I think is going to be the type of tool which will aid them and not change things too quickly. That's all. This lakain in a lusim one plaman na golong narapla. Mibla bin karam liklik shoot belong banisim this lakain sick. We know that our health interventions are going to alter behavior as well. People are going to start wanting such things as mosquito nets to sleep under. We already have people asking us for them. They see them as good things to help keep the incidence of malaria down. Well, they're absolutely right, and it would be wonderful to give it to them. That will alter how they sleep, and that will alter how they build houses, and that will alter how much they roam in the bush if these nets keep tearing up as they try to travel with them. They will have to set the priorities, which is more important.
The whole concept of a central gathering place in which groups larger than the family congregate is alien to the HAGAHAI. So already, major behavior alterations have taken place. The HAGAHAI are becoming less nomadic, more sedentary. This may save them, but they will no longer be who they were.
Cultures change, they always are in the process of change. In situations like this, it's rather rapid change, but people can cope with that so long as they know who they are and certain key items are maintained. Language is very important, and a few things such as marriage customs. It is important that these are not rapidly altered.
You saw it.
We want the people to be able to know how their parents and grandparents lived, what were the particular problems they faced, why they have chosen to change, and why we're here to help them. That will help give them a sense of continuity, and so long as there's a sense of continuity, the roots aren't lost. The sense of identity isn't lost. Small groups of people like this living an ancient lifestyle are very, very unique. They're very precious to the rest of us, really. And these little people are the ones that need the most protection and the most extra care. If we're going to invest in the protection of snail darters or whooping cranes, I can't see why there's any problem in investing in the protection of small, unique groups of people on this earth.